It's quality, it's variety, excitement, discovery.
Emirates is able to offer such a broad selection of top quality wines to its consumers because it plans well in advance and has the foresight to buy wines at an early stage, lay them down in professional cellars until those wines are deemed to be worthy of drinking.
We don't think about what we're going to do next month, we don't think about what we're going to do in 6 months' time. That's already planned. We're looking and thinking about 5 years' time, and 10 years' time, and even 15 years' time on some of our wines.
Emirates has always been focused on quality. I think quality in service, but also quality in the products that are presented on board.
It's giving people exposure to wonderful wines.
My view is life's too short to drink bad wine.
They have a notion of service which is fantastic.
Our wine programme is about putting the best available product on the aircraft. We invest huge amounts in the aircraft themselves, in the cabin crew, in the product we put on the plane, and that includes the wine, of course.
It's nice knowing that the wine you pick will be served to people who will appreciate it.
Quality, choice, beyond expectations.
It's a Thursday evening in Dubai, and the members of the Emirates Wine Board are gathering to make an important presentation to the airline's president, Sir Tim Clark. The board presents a selection of fine wines every 3 months. Some have already been in the Emirates cellar for years and are ready to go on board in first and business class, while others are being considered for purchase.
If the wine selection is good quality and it fits what Emirates is looking for, it's very easy for them to make a positive decision.
Prior to that, we will have seen and tasted through perhaps hundreds of wines. That is the end of a long and difficult process.
Emirates wine lists contain an impressive range of well-known names and include some of the most prestigious chateaux in Bordeaux. 2 members of the selection panel, Oliver Dixon and Robin Paget, have invested valuable time travelling to these iconic properties and building relationships with the people there. One such notable name is the Chateau Smith aux Laffitte. Sir Tim Clark considers one of their 2011 vintages.
So, second wine of Smith aux Laffitte.
What was 11 like as a year?
11 was good. It was underrated for sure. It came off the back of 2 very, very strong years, 9 and 10.
Yep, okay. Okay.
The wine from Chateau Smith aux Laffitte has travelled a long way to Dubai from its vineyard in Bordeaux. A few weeks previously, Oliver and Robin had travelled to the chateau to taste the wines.
So, Oliver, here we are. Chateau Smith aux Laffitte in the Pessac region. Wonderful, wonderful chateau. Great history, remarkable heritage. As we know, amazing wines. Over the years, we've bought both the red and the white, poured it on board, put it in our wine list. A delightful drink.
So Smith aux Laffitte has everything that Emirates is looking for. It's a chateau of great pedigree, producing top quality wines.
Delicious, light, exactly right on the menu.
We never stop. We wake up every morning with the idea of making the best wine in the world, simply. We think we are one of the best chateau estates you can find, and we think Emirates is really one of the very best airlines. So it's a good match, we think.
So here is my 2011 Smith aux Laffitte Red, and I have decanted it because I think it's still a little young to drink straight from the bottle, but this wine will be at its best definitely in a few years from now.
When do you think the best time to be drinking this will be?
If I am very honest, I shall say 2020, because then it will be at its peak and can last for a long time. And I know at Emirates you have the means of your ambitions, so you can keep the wine.
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, that would be perfect, wouldn't it? And in terms of quantity, there is enough to supply first class?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Wines of the quality of Smith aux Laffitte are not very easy to find. Generally in Bordeaux, the better the wines, the more there is demand for those wines.
That's absolutely right. And that's why it's really important to build relationships with chateau owners, so that when you're after great wine, you're front of the queue. So that means coming every single year, building really good personal relationships with them, so that we can buy wines of amazing quality.
How it began, it was quite a few years ago now, about 10 or 11 years ago. The process was relatively simple. We went out, we looked at our schedule, we decided how many bottles of wine we needed of various types, and we went out into the open market and we bought it. We tasted and we bought for the year, and that was it. What became evident as we were then just going through one of the major growth spurts was that that process was no longer going to work, because we would have to lower our quality expectations in order to get the volume of the wine that we needed, and clearly that wasn't going to work. I remember Tim Clark, or Sir Tim as he is now, had been having some similar thoughts, and so we then worked together as a team and said, we're going to change this completely.
It was clear that we needed to understand the industry, and that we needed to go right back to the start of the supply chain, to where things grow, when they're harvested, build relationships with the vineyards right at an early stage.
So right, we're going to start working way into the future. We are going to buy en primeur, we're going to buy now wines that need laying down, and we're going to start building our portfolio so that by the time we get 10 years into the future, we're going to have a range which is just outstanding. We're at that 10-year point now. When you look at our wine list, there will be a number of wines on there which are not freely available in the market. People will wonder, where have you got it from? How can you afford to put that on board your aeroplane? This is outstanding. And that comes from taking those long-term decisions.
I remember very early on, 10 years ago, when Tim sort of was talking about how we need to upscale what we do. And if there was one word that was repeated once, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, it was quality.
To sustain quality wines, that's what it's all about, and we will never ever give up on that or allow that to slip into the sort of periphery of service delivery. It's got to be one of our major USPs in service delivery. And I think that 10 years, I mean, we've all been on a learning
and a journey we have
experience,
well.
and I think what we have in cellars and what's coming out of cellars and appearing on our wine list now, many would kill to be able to get their hands on the kind of parcel quantities that we've got. So good job.
I think it's important to think about what we're trying to do here when we're talking about quality. If you go back many years ago, we were small, and it was easy enough just to go out and buy one wine list for the whole of the fleet for the year. We could do it because you could just go out to the open market and buy those wines. Now, with the size and complexity we have to buy in smaller and smaller parcels of wine, and we put a complete emphasis on quality as being the number one driver.
Well, in procurement we buy more than just wine. We buy all the operational aspects that support the business. So that's ground handling, cargo handling, crew hotels, chauffeur drive, air traffic control, and then the two most important liquids are jet fuel and the wine.
If you're flying across the network today, there'll be at least 27, 28 different wine lists. So you can imagine the logistical challenge of all those different wines to different places. We'll get through a selection of perhaps 400 different wines over a single year.
This year we'll be pouring 10 million bottles of wine on Emirates. That's 8 million in economy, they're the 187ml bottles, and 2 million in the premium cabins of the full-size bottles. Now, to visualise that, if we lay them down in a line, they would stretch all the way from London to Cyprus.
It's a logistical feat to get these millions of bottles from vineyard to cellar and from cellar to aircraft. Every precaution has to be taken to ensure that the wines arrive on board in perfect condition.
We bring in wine not only from France, but also from Australia, South Africa, Spain, Italy, Germany. And typically we air freight anything that doesn't come from France, but the French wines that we bring by ship, they need to get here just in time. So it's a very complex operation. We have a team that supports that who are working on it on a daily basis.
Different routes have different wines and different champagnes. Which I've only started to notice. If you go into Africa, you'll have a different set of wines potentially than maybe going into some other areas.
One of the things we're always very careful about is if you're flying to a recognised winemaking country, We will always serve in first class the best possible wine we can find at that time from that country. A traveller coming from Australia through to the UK, once they've transited through Dubai, they're getting a completely different wine list on the next sector. And if he comes back and then goes down to Africa, again, a different wine list. It gives a huge amount of variety at any time. We need variety because imagine watching the same film every time you got on a flight. You wouldn't want that. We have to offer our frequent flyers variety and choice.
Emirates has a very clear view on what consumption of wine on board will be like for a number of years out. So being able to buy at the en primeur stage, which is the earliest time that the wines are commercialised, allows us to get the access that we need to supply the airline. So Emirates has a cellar where it stores its wine back in Europe.
We were very lucky very early on in the process to start working with a great company based out of Burgundy who had wonderful facilities. And I have to say, it's a very dull, very boring looking warehouse from the outside. When you get inside, it's chock full of the most beautiful wines.
Every year we produce an operating plan that sees typically 10% growth in the fleet, in the capacity we put into the market, but also the wine program has become so popular, and we're certainly seeing that with what we get as consumption figures coming through and having to revise forecasts almost on a monthly basis.
The slopes that you see above the chateau here were first planted, we think, in the 1st century AD. So we're about to celebrate 2,000 years of wine production at this estate.
Haut-Brion is one of the leading wine chateaus in the world, so it's a kind of reputation as well.
We've had a long-term relationship with Emirates. We only produce about 500 cases for a global market a year. So it's not obvious for people to come to us when you have a large customer base. But what Emirates has always looked for is quality over quantity, and we've been happy to be able to work with them and provide that excellence for the cabin.
Emirates has had a working relationship with Chateaubriand for a number of years, and it's bought a number of different wines from the chateau.
To say the wines are sublime would be an understatement. We were there at the last harvest. The attention to detail was extraordinary. It's no wonder they produce such wonderful wines.
Yeah, it's very busy because you start early in the morning and it's a kind of physical work. So at the end of the day, you know what you've done during the day, but you don't really feel it.
Oliver and Robin taste some Haut-Brion vintages with the Chateau's manager, Jean-Philippe Delmas.
Now we're tasting the 2006 here, so we're 8 years from production. Still not ready quite for drinking. When would it be perfect, do you think?
It's not a big mistake to open it now, but I think the best is maybe between now and 2 years, and after for, not forever, but almost forever.
Around 2020?
Something like that, yes.
We finally selected the 2006 Chateaubriand, which will go into the cellar, which will probably come out in 2016, 2017.
Serving wine at 30,000 feet can be a complicated process, and the Emirates team have to consider many factors when putting their fine wines on board.
There's lots of challenges. First and foremost is the ultimate temperature in which you want to serve wine. So the transport process of getting it from our bonded stores on board in the air, and then giving, especially our red wines, some time to come to the ultimate temperatures is a challenge.
Altitude does affect wine. The cabin environment affects the way wine is perceived. Humidity and cabin pressure are the major factors affecting wine. So we do try to combat that through the choice of wine. And really it's about choosing wines that are very well balanced. The acidity, the fruit flavours and the tannins, if they're all in balance, a wine will taste well, even on board.
When we buy our wines, we need to look at wines that are what we call mouth-friendly, that are able to adapt, that have a natural acidity that works well up in the air, but also works with different styles of food.
Sometimes it can change the taste of the wines to be poured in the sky, but my white are so full of expression that they can stand anything. And I like the explosion of fruit of my red, and I think we fit with Asian or European food as well. So for us, it's not a problem.
It's important for the team to have close relationships with the chateau, which means spending time on the ground in Bordeaux.
Emirates has developed a number of very good relationships with key producers in the Bordeaux region.
We really only started our wine program in earnest 10 years ago, and there weren't very many chateaus that believed that their wines were actually going to make it on board. They hadn't really heard what Emirates was doing, they didn't know our reputation. Now, 10 years in, Emirates is a very respected wine buyer because we buy in good quantities, we buy good qualities, we store the wines in ideal circumstances, and it's fantastic then to see the pride of the chateaus when they see their product on board and then see it come back.
The strategy is to get in at the beginning, to think long term, to build deep relationships with the producers, not as often as possible to avoid middlemen. We want to know when the good stuff is produced. That means keeping an eye on the weather in France, how the harvest went in Australia, and that means physically going and spending time there. There's nothing like speaking to the vineyard owners to know when you should be buying and which are the great vintages. And they will be quite honest. They will say, this year was a good year, or this year was an excellent year.
Prestigious chateaus are very careful where they position their brand. People do worry about their wine being served at altitude. People worry about their wine not being communicated in the right ways. They like Emirates because it does a fantastic job in representing their brand on board. So it creates the right environment, has the right consumer for their wine, it's in front of the right people.
We're about luxury. We're about an experience in the air. For me, it evokes the glamorous days of air travel in the 1950s and 1960s, when people dressed for dinner even though they were on a plane. The wine producers that we work with have started to understand that and started to see that their product linked with our product is a beautiful bit of harmony.
Next stop for Oliver and Robin is Chateau Figeac, where they get a chance to discuss the wines with Frédéric Fay, director of the domain.
Hello, welcome to the Chateau Figeac. So now, let me introduce Chateau Figeac 2009.
2009 vintage has a remarkably good reputation. We're 5 years down the track. It's early days for this wine. When will it be drinking at its best?
Different moments, but for me, start drinking the 09 maybe in 2020. And after you can keep it, the longevity is really important. You can keep it 20 years more to 25 years more without any problems.
This vintage fits perfectly with first class.
It's perfect for the first class, and we are really proud to be in your first class.
Luxury in a luxurious environment.
Emirates has bought several vintages of Figeac, the Grand Vin from the Chateau, as well as their second wine, La Grange Neuve de Figeac.
Figeac, for me, a personal favourite, and I certainly know for our president, Tim Clark, a favourite too, and I can fully understand why.
When we were at the Chateau, we were offered several parcels, which I then put in front of the wine board, and the 2012 Chateau Figeac was selected to go on board in the future on first class.
And this, gentlemen, is one of my favourite chateaux. It's still fine. Give it a few more years.
Got faith in Figeac. Best, almost. It was right up there in terms of centimillion properties. It was brilliant.
My role is very much looking after about those 50 million meals a year that we serve on board of all our aircraft. And so the wine bit is the fun bit.
On the whole culinary journey on Emirates, they do an exceptional job. They go out of their way to make sure that they're serving things correctly, that the table linens are set up beautifully. Things are really beautifully done. And I think added to that is just an enhancement of the way that they serve their wine.
You've got to set together a balanced wine list. We've only got a limited number of wines we can put on board. Planes are finite in space. We've got a finite amount of storage. So when we're selecting the wines that go on board, we've got to get wines that work together.
I think Emirates is unique with its approach because we really care for what the customer wants. That's our primary focus. We want to be able to make sure that they are getting the best wines from the best regions.
Emirates always make sure that they pair the menus with the wine that we have in a very nice way.
If a customer is having cheese, we recommend that the customer is served port wine or maybe a red wine. Or if they're having dessert or fruit, then we could pair it with a glass of champagne.
If I take a light starter or fish, I'd like to have a white and Chablis, I'm just going to go straight for it, okay? But I'm more than happy to try something that I don't know. I would tend to try, at least the champagne, one white and one red, just to get a sense of, what they've got.
We believe that the passengers that pay very, very good money to fly with Emirates is that they deserve great quality food with a great quality wine. Food and wine is always about discovery.
I think you can clearly find something for every dish because you've got lighter reds, stronger reds, so you got, something on the white side. Otherwise, you just drink champagne. I think champagne goes with everything, so that's not a problem.
You've got to have wines that work with food, and that's why we love Bordeaux, because Bordeaux is a wine that is immaculate with food. And you can take from white meats right through to game on Bordeaux. It's a very versatile style of wine.
All of the Emirates business and first class lists are anchored with red Bordeaux. You will always find a red Bordeaux on board. And that will be a wine that Emirates will probably have bought some years ago and will have cellared until that wine is what we would decide at the time of buying, ready to be drunk. And a lot of those wines would have been bought 6 months after they were made, just to give you an idea of how long they're cellared for. And that's really a minimum.
The famous Chateau Lafite Rothschild in the heart of Bordeaux epitomizes longevity and heritage. It's owned by the Domaine Baron de Rothschild, a group which has many varied links with Emirates Airline.
Each year, each day is a new story. Each vintage is a new story, so we have to restart. We don't have exactly the same conditions year by year, so we have to recreate all the time something new. It's quite fabulous.
The Domaine Baron de Rothschild family of wines has several properties. The flagship, I think even they would agree, is Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Emirates has quite a wide relationship with Domaine Baron de Rothschild. Some of their top wines, Les Caroades de Lafite, which is the second wine of Chateau Lafite, and Duart Milan are both in the cellar for future consumption on first class.
It's a name that's instantly recognisable. The Rothschild element to it gives it heritage.
We want to continue this very classic evolution winemaking process, which is very natural. In fact, it's quite easy to make good wine. You take good grapes, you put in the vat, you maintain the fermenting process with a control of temperature, and you have good wine at the end. Well, okay, sometimes it's more difficult. The quality obtained at the end is a lot of little details, but if you have the good grapes coming from the good terroir, you can make an exceptional wine.
The wonderful thing about working with the Rothschilds team is they have access to estates that are not only in Bordeaux, but across France and across the wider world. They gave us the opportunity to buy some of their wines for economy, and also to blend the wines so that it would fit the palate that we thought would be perfect for on board. The wine was called Domaine de Ossière, and it was served in our economy cabin.
Oliver is evaluating a wine for economy class with enologist Diane Flamand.
And this is the Blason d'Ossière Corbière.
This is the 11th vintage.
Mm.
Domaine d'Ossière has been purchased by Domaine Baron de Rothschild in 1999, and Blason d'Ossière is the perfect wine to be matched with food. It's perfectly ready to be drunk now, with a lot of fruity notes on the nose, round and supple tannins on the palate, and a very good freshness at the end of the mouth. So All the De Beer wines are like that, and all these wines are elaborated first to be matched with food.
So given its ease of drinking and its versatility, this would be the perfect wine to go on board economy class.
Yes, of course.
Of course, France and Bordeaux is the core of our offering and the one that we've spent a lot of time focusing on in terms of laying down. However, we feature wines from every major wine producing country around the world, and our aim is to not only reflect our passenger profiles and the destinations we go to, but make it that we've got really highly recognisable wines on board. So whatever is the latest favourite that's coming up, say in Sydney, we'll be ears and eyes out and make sure we've got that.
We're trying to appeal to two very different types of people. The old world wine connoisseur and his counterpart in the new world. There are brilliant wines in the old world, fabulous wines in the new world. And so what we're trying to do is when someone opens the list, and we try and think about even if they're not going to drink, they should open that list and they should look down and go, they should recognise the brands on it.
What we're looking for is for the two whites and the two reds that you see on the wine list to be sufficiently different from each other. So if there's a French white wine from somewhere like Sancerre, which was a very clean, dry, crisp wine, then we'll be looking for a wine to complement that style. So it might be something a little bit richer, something with some oak aging perhaps, and we'd want to represent other regions of the world. So in that case, we might look for something from Australia or from California, for example.
You might see, for example, a deep, lush Shiraz from the Barossa Valley in South Australia to offset a delicate, aged Bordeaux. So you've got two very different styles of wines from two very different regions. With regions other than France, we spend as much time and as much effort thinking about the wines and sourcing them. That means spending time there, meeting the producers, understanding what they're doing, understanding what the consumers in those countries think about those wines.
At the wine board meeting, G, a fine South African wine from the Stellenbosch region, comes under scrutiny.
This is the best thing I've tasted from South Africa. Recently, this was put up against a lot of very, very famous wines, and this came out second.
Okay, good enough.
The members of the selection team debate new ways to improve the experience of serving wine in a cabin environment.
There's one thing that always limits us in airspace, which is space. There's a lot of equipment that goes on board, and unfortunately wine glasses are susceptible to breakage. It's a fine balance of what we're able to do, but we've actually just been given the approval to start a process and get a better quality glass on board.
So in the last wine board meeting, we looked at buying a parcel of Cheval Blanc 2011, which won't mature for another 6-7 years. But a wine like that needs to be served in appropriate glassware. It's got so much to offer in its aromatics that the appropriate glassware is important.
If you put Cheval Blanc on, people are going to expect a fuss. You know, this is a really special wine. So let's think about that.
Having a great product, having great wine is one thing. Making sure that it is looked after and in great shape by the time it gets on board an aeroplane is a task in its own right. Once it gets on board the aeroplane, how it is served, how the crew are trained, the way in which it's poured, how crew will guide people as to the combination between a wine and the food. That is all a huge effort behind the scenes.
And it's clearly visible that there has been quite a lot of focus and training done with the crew in terms of wines and making sure that it gets served to the optimum and that it's not just sort of poured in and hope it works.
There's about 100 different wines going on board each year, okay? What are the different regions? Because we have to split it up. There is just not enough wine to get one parcel of wine to go business class, white wine 1 in all regions. So we have to geographically split them up. What are the regions? So having great wines and great glasses is not really enough. You need to have the right approach to serving wines, and that requires quite a lot of training.
Most of the cabin crew is so proud of the wine list and so proud about what they're serving that their knowledge base is very good.
I am a business class service trainer, so I'm there to develop the crew, to show them things such as how to pronounce the names, and then also to go forward and look at pouring and presentation skills.
My role is to ensure that the crew are able to serve the customer confidently. There's a practical application, as in how to describe the wines, how to go and open the wines, and we create different scenarios that could potentially be coming their way.
We always make sure to train them how they hold the glass from the base, the pouring technique, and we try our best once they go on board to implement this training.
So the approach of the wine training, I think, is to give the crew the best understanding of, firstly, the product, and also how the customer wants to receive that product.
You have to spend a bit of time researching the list before you get out in front of the customer. Yeah? What are the tools to help you? How to coach people to recommend wines. We do that through showing them the different styles of wine and how they will pair with classic dishes on the menu. So, a wonderful extravaganza of pan-fried lobster, king prawn, scallops, sea bass in fresh herb butter and creamy potato gratin and sautéed seasonal vegetables. What are you picking out from there to give you the link between the food and the wine? The physical service is also very important, so how to pour a wine and how much of a wine to pour all gets covered in the intensive program that the cabin crew undergoes. Okay, have a sip and try and roll it around a bit. If you can, tip your head forward, slurp in a little bit of air, okay, because that will further oxidize the wine and develop it, yeah?
The final stop on the wine team's tour of Bordeaux is Château Léoville-Poiferré to meet the chateau's owner, Didier Cuvelier.
Léoville-Poiferré makes great wine because we have fantastic terroir. And terroir means, in French, microclimate. The vineyard is a very long time, for 3 centuries, and of course, great soil and subsoil. And we have fantastic worker teams.
For our team, this is our 5th year in here. We come every year for the harvest for about 15 days. And we come because of the environment, the people, the way they welcome us here, but mostly the attention to details, the making process, the harvest, and the passion they have making this wine.
Léoville-Poiferré, that was a relationship that's taken many, many years of slow building and trust building for them to understand what we're trying to do as an airline and us understanding what they're trying to do as a simply sublime quality wine.
It's a very deep wine with there seems to be a lot of complexity in there.
That's the main characteristic of Poiferré, the complexity, the very good balance between alcohol, acidity, tannin, finesse, elegance. I think it's the main characteristic of Poiferré. But it's always difficult for an owner to do a commentary about wine. I prefer your opinion.
It's a delicious wine. There's so much complexity in there. There's black fruits. You've got those classic sort of Bordeaux notes of cigar box and cedar wood, and there's a lot going on in there. It's nearly 10 years old now, but it's still so young. So if that was to be served in 2 to 3 years, do you think that would work well?
Well, for me, it will be perfect.
Far away from the vineyards of Saint-Julien, the Léoville-Poiferré 2011 is poured and evaluated in Dubai.
Bring it on, guys. That was just... I like that.
We work with Emirates Airlines for 8 years. And we are very proud because this company is one of the most prestigious companies in the world, and it represents a luxury environment, and I'm very proud to serve my wine in this company.
It's a long rise upwards for Emirates fine wines. From the roots of the vine stretching deep into the earth to the final pouring at 30,000 feet. It's also a journey that spans the entire globe, showing the history, hard work and pride that goes into every drop tasted by the airline's passengers.
It's really good to know that our hard work is appreciated by people in such prestigious environment.
I believe what makes us really, really special is the fact that we look ahead rather than what is required over the next 12 to 18 months. We're actually purchasing lots of our wines out with a 10-year focus.
Emirates wine philosophy is about giving an experience in the air that you would expect in a fine dining restaurant on the ground.
What we're thinking about is our customer needs and wants a long time in the future in a way that most people would not be able to offer.
They've got great vintages, they've got very good quality, and they really pair the wines nicely with the food.
I'm very proud to fly with Emirates.
Emirates, it's a place where I work, it's a place where I relax, and it's a place that takes me from where I am to where I need to be.
It's a great honor for all of us to produce prestigious wines for Emirates Airline.
We spend so much more time traveling today, so to concentrate on improving the environment within that space, I think, is very much a part of the future.